Welcome to the Weaver Sews. I'm Daryl Lancaster. In a previous video, I talked all about setting in a sleeve, basic sleeve construction, but what I haven't talked about is how to get the sleeve to fit. The difficulty here is that the sleeve is connected to a bodice, whether in the form of a jacket or a tunic or a top or a dress, and getting all of it to play nicely in the sandbox can be sometimes daunting. This is by no means meant to cover all the issues that can go wrong with sleeves, but I've picked out the most common fit issues from my years of classes that ultimately relate to sleeves and some simple fixes to try. So let's jump right in. First, let's talk about the mysterious Y line that cuts across the upper bodice on many of my patterns. Here you can see it on the 100 jacket front, the 100 jacket back, and oddly enough, diagonally on the sleeve. Often I have a student, usually shorter in stature, that has a more petite torso. And anyone who's a petite knows that just hemming things shorter just isn't going to work. Waistlines, pockets, darts, armholes, all usually have to be shortened or compressed to scale a pattern down horizontally. The Y line I conveniently placed on my patterns can help with that. If you find that darts are too low or that the neckline appears too long, by folding along the Y line, in essence, creating a tuck along that line, half the desired amount will usually fix the problem. So for example, if I want to shorten the upper front or back above the bust line, say 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters, I would make a tuck in the pattern 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter to accomplish this. That part is easy. I'm taking a tuck that is only half the amount. Because the tuck folds back on itself, it's a spatial geometry thing. Anytime you make an alteration to any part of a pattern, you'll need to also alter anything that attaches to it. The band also has a Y line, so fold the same amount there as well. But what about the sleeve? It would be logical to just take the same tuck horizontally across the sleeve cap, but that might not be the best fix. That fix may reduce the height of the sleeve cap too much, causing other fit issues. The sleeve cap circumference does need to be reduced to fit the smaller armhole. But I found that a better way to reduce the circumference of the sleeve cap is to take those same tucks, but taper them down diagonally to nothing where they meet. Use the Y lines on the sleeve as a guide. Another common issue I've come across is the pattern shoulder seam line does not line up with your actual shoulder. It may tip too far to the back. This is a relatively simple fix. By adding to the back of the shoulder seam at the armhole and taking that same amount away from the front, tapering both to nothing at the neckline can easily position a shoulder seam to your body dimensions. But what about the sleeve? We really didn't change the armhole circumference, so what's the problem? The shoulder dot on the sleeve no longer lines up with the shoulder seam line. So we need to rotate that forward. Using the same Y lines that we talked about before, slice down each of the lines from the sleeve cap to but not through where they meet. Rotate the sleeve shoulder dot forward, overlapping the same amount that was removed from the shoulder seam line in the bodice front and spreading the same amount that was added to the shoulder seam line in the back. Fill in with some additional tracing medium and true up the lines. Depending on your posture, age, and a host of other body differences, you might find that shortening on the Y line in just the front or just the back of the bodice and then carrying that alteration through to the sleeve brings the grain lines back into alignment. Because this is all about grain lines. And when a garment's grain lines don't sit perpendicular and parallel to the floor, then there's a problem in the pattern. Bodies with significant curve across the upper back may find that the chest wall is somewhat shortened, and to bring the garment back into alignment, only a tuck in the Y line on the front and corresponding sleeve is necessary. Or cutting across the upper back on the Y line can help spread the upper back for more length, along with shortening on the Y line on the front. Use that same technique we just demonstrated for rotating the shoulder on the sleeve forward to accommodate those changes. When we did the video on figuring out your size and used my daughter as an example, one of the issues that she had was a bicep that was too full for the pattern. Now remember, it is never you that's the problem. You are who you are. It's a failure of the pattern to meet your needs. Remember, it's a piece of paper. You can change it, and that's a lot easier than changing your body. I learned this technique years ago, probably from my trusty Vogue sewing book. More sewing encyclopedia than sewing step by step. But I have a number of editions on my shelf, and it's always the first book I reference when I have questions about anything involving sewing or tailoring. If you need more room across the upper arm, cut first vertically through the center of the sleeve, parallel to the grain line, to, but not through, the cap seam line at the shoulder and the lower edge. Then cut a perpendicular line through the bicep to, but not through, the seam lines at the underarm seam. By spreading the desired amount to increase the bicep, the cap collapses inward. If this makes the cap too shallow, increase the height of the cap the same amount that the cap overlapped from the spread. Obviously, testing your alterations here will be really, really helpful. I always make a number of test garments just to be sure that one alteration didn't cause another issue. It is easy to raise the slope or make the slope steeper than what the pattern calls for. Simply add or subtract the depth of the shoulder seam allowance at the armhole or armscye on both the front and the back. But what about the sleeve? If you like the sleeve that's there, just reposition it. The simplest way to do that is to cut out the armhole and move it up or down depending on what you want to do to change the slope of the shoulder. What happens if your shoulders are narrower than the pattern calls for? Well, that's one of the simplest fixes of all. I use this cool tracing tool called a styling design ruler, which you can purchase from wawak.com. Place the large curved end up against the cutting line of the armhole you want, matching up where it curves into the underarm. Tip it towards the shoulder you want. Trace that line and voila! You have an armhole and sleeve that you want with a shoulder that better fits your shape. Yes, the armhole is now technically just a millimeter or two bigger in circumference, but the sleeve is slightly larger than the armhole to create ease at the head, so it shouldn't make a difference in this case. It's minimal. Next time in part 2, we will learn my favorite technique for giving more room across the front or back upper body without changing the armhole or sleeve, which will then set us up for the ability to put a different armhole in a different body. So stay tuned. I'm Daryl Lancaster for the Weaver Sews.